Thank you very much for the introduction, Sam. Yes, I have a short talk prepared, and we will talk a little bit about the taxonomy of social engineering, what the goals of an attacker of you are, and yeah, how can we achieve personal contact with our potential victims? And yeah, I'll just talk a little bit about that. So just a really quick introduction about me. I'm a PhD student at University Bochum and the Westphalian University in Gelsenkirchen. I'm not really a bug bounty hunter. I'm more like a researcher guy. Um, and yes, I do some things, but that's enough of the introduction. And yeah, let's dive right into it because we don't have a lot of time and I have some slides prepared for you. So the first thing we want to talk about when we talk about attacks is we always want to see some kind of taxonomy, and this is based on work of Greitzer, who showed this at a workshop at Security and Privacy 2014, and we see we have some categories of social engineering if we talk about it. The first one is no interpersonal action. So basically, when we do intelligence gathering, this is based on open source intelligence and dumpster diving. The open source intelligence is online, while dumpster diving is mostly offline, where you try to get as much information about your victim as possible by searching through trash, which can be disgusting sometimes, but you will always find some valuable things. For example, USB sticks or shredded documents, not securely shredded documents, documents that aren't shredded at all. So this is always a good idea to gather information if you are on site. We do open source intelligence mainly when we conduct information gathering online. So, and this is something my talk will focus on when we go to the cases that I prepared for you. We'll talk about open source intelligence. We then have interpersonal action, and this is when we actually try to exploit our victims, which we also do in a non-electronic way. So this is basically for information exfiltration, for example, shoulder surfing on a plane or on a train, impersonation attacks and tailgating attacks. These are not really in the focus of this talk, and we have electronic interpersonal action, which is your classic smishing, phishing, and phishing attacks. Further, we always try to gather information about our victim beforehand, and this is from my point of view where social engineering is either successful or unsuccessful, how well we are prepared about our potential victim. Because if we have personal contact with them, it's easier for us to actually get the victim to do something that we want them to do. And three things that we always want them to do when we're talking about social engineering online is basically they visit a website that might look familiar, but actually is not the website they are familiar with. So, for example, a fraudulent login page for Twitter would be something that is that we try to achieve here, or they download data. So your classic ransomware case, or also information gathering if you install a keylogger on their system by an email attachment, or we want them to carry out certain actions. This is, for example, if we want to do a CEO fraud or password exfiltration or two-factor exfiltration. So if I impersonate a technician and I want my victim to give out, for example, his two-factor credentials, his second-factor credentials, I can try to call them up and actually talk with them. For example, that there was a security issue and I need access to their private account because I want to check if private data is lost or some story. And you always see with the story, the whole attack that we carry out is either successful or unsuccessful. That's why basically things like Nigerian prince mails that we all have in our inboxes are not that successful anymore like they were in yeah, in the beginning of the internet. So that's basically your email where someone wants you to get your bank account out for them because they have a large amount of money that they somehow need to get out of their country or something like that. So that's basically our goal. Our goal is to achieve personal contact, and without the person actually knowing that that we are currently stealing information from them. And the more personal I craft my relationship, the more likely I will have success. And if I'm able to smoothly integrate my attack into the daily life of my victim, I probably will be successful. So if my victim, like afterwards, says, "Oh yeah, I thought that was strange, but it was reasonable request due to the misconfiguration I had," then my attack was likely successful. Drink a bit of water real quick. Um, so as I mentioned before, we will focus on open source intelligence, or like a subtype of it in this talk. And open source intelligence is always your go-to method. And the most important step, especially if you're not on site at your client, but if you're sitting remotely and you try to get as much information out of your contractor as possible. So there's one big problem with open source intelligence. It's that you have too much data often, and then you have some sort of information overload, and you need to prioritize your your findings. So you need to really check, okay, what will my victim most likely be like, what's the pages he often visits, so I can maybe forge a login site. And the problem is that there is so much data publicly available. Sources can include emails, domains, IPs, or biometric data, location-based data, or telephone numbers, etc. And we can always find information that is somehow crucial for our attack in open source intelligence. And that's a big problem because as our victim, he might not, or she might not know which piece of information I'm going to use against him, because in specific scenarios I have specific data that is very valuable. And just as an example how OSINT looks like, I just used the German hacker Orbit, who collected mostly open source intelligence from various sources and then dumped it online. At least that's what the BKA, the German Federal Police, said during their investigation, that a lot of information that was put out from the BKA was either open source intelligence or it was simply a lie. And so this is the current major case on open source intelligence, at least from my opinion, because he also probably scraped passwords that were breached, and then he logged into accounts and stole data from personal accounts just because the password was breached before. There are also rumors that he broke some sort of account reset mechanism in German email providers, but there's really no proof about that. So currently it's basically open source intelligence from various sources used against the victims of this attack. Why is OSINT so successful? This is mainly based on four things, at least from what we see. The first one is unclear privacy mechanisms in online platforms. Sometimes they're a little bit shady, which data is really public and which data is not. We will talk about that in our case later. We also have oversharing of employees, so a lot of data is shared which might not be shared with the public. Then we have poor Opsec practices, so operational security practices, which aren't enforced. For example, don't post your badge on social media. And in general, we have social media campaigns that can also be a real pain for operational security, and therefore an attack vector for someone who is using human intelligence to attack companies. And that's the theoretical piece of my talk. We will now talk about the different cases that I put up here. One case that is pretty popular from the beginning of 2018 was the CompTIA Flip My Cube competition, where a lot of people put their workspaces on Twitter under the hashtag CompTIA Flip My Cube. It was a big thing in 2018 when it came out because there were so many Opsec leaks that it's pretty hard to see them all. But as you can see on the pictures, there a lot of people just posted their inbox on the photo, or like the domain controller of an organization, or firewall rules. So this was generally like a real OPSEC fail. And there are other hashtags that are also provide valuable information. For example, if you are on site at a client and you use the hashtag work badge to find like the current work badge of an employee, you can forge that with the information you get from the internet, which is generally, it works well on Instagram and Twitter. So we try to use Twitter hashtags or Instagram hashtags or wherever hashtags are, just to search information. That's basically what they are for, and we use this information for attack scenarios. For example, if we want to get firewall rules, then the CompTIA Flip My Cube could be a good source of information. Even though I just checked this earlier in the day, and there aren't much posts online anymore on the CompTIA Flip My Cube. There was also a best of account, which also seems to be down. If anyone has more information on why it is down, feel free to reach out to me, because I'm interested in that. So yeah, that's the first case study. So basically here the problem is social media that is mixed up with poor OPSEC, because these people don't seem to be educated, that you don't put information about your workplace online, or at least critical information is something you shouldn't take a photo of and then put online. Next step we have is oversharing of employees and poor operational security, because they don't know that there is actually valuable data. And the attack from Carsten Knoll from 33C3. His talk was titled "Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego?" And basically he scraped Instagram for airline tickets, and after he scraped that, he stole miles from customers, and then got free flights, or potentially got free flights. And we use that as a methodology if we find someone in a company who is really active on Instagram, to maybe find information like this. So we find an employee who uses Instagram regularly. There might be a step in between, because maybe he has a private profile, or she, and we need to befriend some sort of stock puppet account. Then we monitor his stories and posts for airline tickets, for examples, or other barcodes or personal secrets that he shares. And then we read out data from barcodes, do whatever is in scope of our audit, and then we profit because our audit is successful. And here is basically the case. You just scrape Instagram for the hashtag boarding pass, and you will find that there are probably now 100 and a few thousand of these posts are online. And then you scan the QR code with whatever type of scanner you have at hand. And then you get this blue information, which is basically the reservation number. And it's now anonymized, this ticket, but there is a last name on the ticket. And then you can log into the airline and see what data was used to actually book this ticket. You can see booking details like like details on how the ticket was purchased, what's the address, maybe the workplace address or the private address. You can furthermore collect miles, which is what Carsten Noel did in his talk at 33C3, or you can rebook a flight, which is great because sometimes in the red team assessment you need to disrupt critical business processes, which could be a meeting, and this works just fine. This also works fine with, at least in Germany, with train tickets. So we can use this information to really disrupt business processes, which is sometimes in scope of our red team assessment or of our social engineering audit. And this is something we could define as a goal, and then we reach our goal. And this is, bad for the company, or good for the company, because they audited it, and now they can enforce rules on their users. So that's basically this case story oversharing. Then we have unclear privacy mechanisms, and another platform that is pretty great for unclear privacy mechanisms is Facebook. But because everyone does Facebook, I used Strava once or twice, or use it once or twice, because Strava was popular in the beginning of 2018 as well, because the hidden places of secret services all around the world were suddenly popping up in this heat map. And we found a methodology to find people who work at these places, or several methodologies. And the first step we need to take is we need to find some place of interest. So this is a military site in Germany, and you can see that there is a circle on the picture, and this circle is called a segment. And now you can find this segment on your favorite fitness app. And a segment is basically something where you can compete online with other users of this app. So you need to run faster than them. And if we found our segment, we can see who is the best in the segment. And we can not only see who is the best, but the 20 best people overall, and the 20 best women. And if we have a sock puppet account on our favorite fitness app, we can also see all people who ever ran this segment, unless they stated by the time they uploaded their activity that they don't want to share this. But this is pretty, at least in our favorite fitness app, this is pretty hard to achieve because of the way the UI and the UX is designed. And so therefore it's pretty hard for people to hide. And you find information. For example, you find information where they are stationed. If like this was a military scenario, you can find that some of those users we find, you can track them around the world where they are stationed. You also find information which brand of jogging shoe they use, which bicycle type they use, which brand of bicycle they use, how they are daily commuting to work and stuff like that. And all of this information is something we can then use to craft really, really good phishing campaigns. We did some case studies with a few companies here, and we see that we can forge pretty good phishing mails with that, and people don't recognize them as phishing emails. So that's find some people. So now the question is, how do you find people that work in the company that you're auditing? You can create malicious segments. So basically, the segments we used before were regular segments where we tried to just de-anonymize people. But if you have an audit, you can create malicious segments to lure users of a specific company into your segment, and then you have activity information about them. As you can see here, this looks strange and this looks strange. This looks like a starting point, and actually this is a company in Germany where bicycles are stored during the day, and this is the way the commuters of those people who come by bike will leave the company. So we can create our malicious segment here by uploading a GPX file, and then by the time they start commuting home and they activate the app, we will directly see them in our segment, and who they are, and then depending on what information they share with the app, we see all the types of information that I mentioned earlier. And this is a pretty good scenario if you have like a company that has more than 100 employees. You can find those patterns and just use that for your audit and craft phishing campaigns that are a little bit off the beaten track. So they are harder to detect in our experience, and this is something that we like to do. Originally, Nathan Rusa discovered this privacy leak on the heat map. But we did the whole company thing. I just forgot to mention Nathan. Sorry. He discovered the privacy leak about the military bases that were secret and that they were revealed by this heat map. So credit where credit is due. So as the last case study, I have something that is that we found out recently. That is that that ATMs where you don't draw cash from, but you load up your Oyster card, for example, or like your daily commute card for public trains. So whenever no money is coming out of a machine, there is low structural security. So as you can see, this is basically in the university which I attended. You see that someone can photograph from the way up, and someone could be sitting here and just steal pins like in a pretty old-fashioned way. And this is not just the case at our university, but also at train stations where you can pay for your ticket on such a machine, and you don't get out cash. So there is low structural security, and that's a way we pretty successfully fished pins earlier. So this is just a little bonus for the talk. And some tools that we find, or I find useful. The first one is Datasploit. If you are gathering a lot of information in little time, but it's pretty unorganized the way it comes from GitHub, but it's easy to extend and organize. So for example, we can dump every information we find if you're using Elastic, you can just put it in Elastic and then do some analysis on the data. If you need to check something real quick, Intel Techniques is really helpful because they provide a web page where you can just put on whatever kind of information you find. So maybe it's a domain or maybe it's an IP you find, and then you can just use Intel Techniques to get direct access to the best research, or not the best, but pretty good research sites. If you're auditing a whole company, we can use everything a bug bounty hunter normally uses to increase his attack surface and gather information about it. So maybe we can do subdomain enumeration, we can do an nmap weaponizer, whatever you want to do, review source code, to just find information that really shouldn't be out there, which is normally considered private, and then use this to get to another information and then craft our personal contact with the company or with an employee of the company. Another thing that I found pretty useful and that is less talked about is that you need to audit your own operational security if you're interacting with the company directly. So use burner phones, use Tor, use VPN, whatever you need, just so you don't get that you're not too noisy and you get lost in the data, so to speak. And which is also quite useful, but not a must for social engineering or OSINT, is Python, because Python you can pretty much script really easily. You can also use Go, I just forgot to mention it, or whatever script language you're using, so a bit of scripting is always useful, even if you're doing social engineering or OSINT. Yes, that was my talk. I took 25 minutes. I'll just check real quick if I have some questions on Twitter from you. But apart from that, I'm basically finished with my talk. On the right side, you can see some accounts that I find pretty useful whenever when I'm looking for inspiration or when I'm looking for cool stories. Tinkersec is really great. He's sharing red team stories not in real time, but he shares them after his engagements, which is pretty entertaining. Just scrolled through the latest It Takes a Crowd hashtags, and I don't see a question for me. So I'm done with my talk. I hope you enjoyed it and you learned a little bit about social engineering and open source intelligence and how you can gather information. And maybe this will help you with bug bountying, because for me, I collected some bug bounties while researching this, because basically not all the data we find should be open. So there is a connection with bug bounty hunting. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and yes, if you have anything to say to me afterwards, you can just find me on Twitter. Thank you very much for your time, and have a great ongoing conference. But first of all, I think you're all heading to lunch if you are based in America.